All right, good evening, everybody. We're going to just take a couple minutes to let some last minute folks join us. In the meantime, let's get a sense of who's out there in the World Wide Web. Uh, there's a question box on the interface here. I want you to take a look at that for a moment and just let you know that that's your space to ask questions today. Interact with us here in Stillwater, but the questions you ask aren't visible to any of the other participants. So feel free to ask whatever questions you would like. In the meantime, while we're letting some other folks join us, we've got over 200 people online with us tonight. Welcome. Just a little get to know you. If you woke up this morning and there was snow on the ground, in the question box, put an exclamation point for every inch of snow that was on the ground, and we'll see who wins the prize. Not that there's a prize, but to see who's out there. All right, we got people responding. A lot of 1 inch, a lot of 1 inch of snow, 2 inches. Well done. We had some snow. We had somebody with 4 inch. Christopher Phillips. Well done, sir. All right, we got a half an inch. Good job. All right, let's try a little bit of snow. No solid inches. All right, let's try somebody with more exclamation points than I can count. Well done. Yep, yeah, we're working on the misspelling that we've got going on. Thank you for that. But also for, let's figure out who else we have out there. Part of my presentation today is geared towards Oklahoma students. So let's get a sense of who out there is from Oklahoma, if you will, please. Let's give a bunch of exclamation points if you're from Oklahoma. Well done, looking good. My friends from Texas, of course. Let's do T's. Let's do T's for Texas. Nice. All right. T's for Texas. All right, let's do state abbreviations. If you're not from Oklahoma or Texas, throw out a state abbreviation. I'll shout out to your home state, just so we get a sense of who's out there today. Missouri, nice. Thank you for joining us. All right, I'm going to go ahead and dive in here in California, Washington, Kansas. Katie's scrolling really fast through here, looking really good. Kansas, Arkansas. Welcome, everybody. We're super thrilled to have you here, especially our friends from California. Being originally from California, Maryland. I'm originally from California, so you California folks are near and dear to my heart. Delaware, Florida, fabulous. I've got a couple of colleagues here in the room with me who are going to, hopefully, if things go well, stay off camera, but help me with some of my presentation today. I have Erin Smith, she's our Director of Communications, and Katie Vaz, who's helping with us with the audio and visual today, does a lot of our social media and that sort of thing. They're going to help me manage the questions as we go through. Feel free to shout out as we go along. I'll address the questions if they're pertinent to what I'm talking about then. I'll address them then. If I'm about to cover that information, that's fine. I'm gonna leave the question out there. And then if we don't get to your question or your question is too specific or may pertain to just a small group of people, we have a team of folks that are going to do some outreach based on your questions. So if we don't get to you tonight, feel free to remind us. No, excuse me. Feel free to contact us with that question, or we'll do some outreach as well. So I'm going to go ahead now that we've got almost 300 people involved. Go ahead and get started. My name is Ben Hagan, and I'm the assistant director responsible for outreach, whether it's financial aid, admissions, what have you. And a lot of what I do is meeting with families all around the country. I sat in my office on Saturday. We had over almost 3,000 people on our campus on Saturday. Perhaps some of you were there with us. And we spent a lot of time talking about paying for college. We spent a lot of time talking about scholarship opportunities, loans, and those sorts of things. So I'm very excited to be with you tonight to talk you through some of the nuances, some of the details, some of the steps that you need to take to get a position where you want to be. This, like I mentioned, this presentation is geared predominantly towards high school seniors. So if your student is a junior, what have you, or sophomore, we have an opportunity. You'll have an opportunity to learn what you can expect for the next year. There are some changes, minor things from year to year, but we're in good shape for that. Or you'll be in good shape for that, rather. A little bit about myself. When I was a senior in high school, my dad took an opportunity to sit me down He's a man of very few words. You know, one time we spent 14 hours in the car, and he said about 6 things to me, one of which I think was, "Hey, do you need to stop for the bathroom?" So when he sat me down, he basically said had 3 things to say. One is that if you want to go to college, it's up to you. But you've got 3 options. 1, you can go to college. 2, you can get a job. Or 3, you can join the military. Knowing that my grandmother had a number of her children in the military, in the Vietnam War, in Iraq and Afghanistan, that wasn't an option. I knew I wasn't going to get a job, and so going to college was the option for me. What I didn't know is about the adventure that I was about to embark on, and the things and how going to college was going to change my life and position me in a way that I would not have been able to otherwise. The next thing I want to talk about is a slide that I think is particularly valuable in this day and age. You can go through the bullet points on your own. You can save it for later. There's so much, and I don't think I can overstate this. There's so much language in today's media about the rising cost of a college education. College students aren't getting jobs. We all know the college education isn't worth it, these sorts of things. While those things are out there, people are saying them, I find them to be disingenuous. Perhaps they're even dishonest, but what I do know is they're dangerous. That in a day and age when 40% of high school students decide that they can't afford college with doing absolutely zero research, when 70% of high school students decide that college is unaffordable to them or unobtainable to them, without a complete picture of what their financial opportunities at that institution are. This is dangerous language for these folks to be out there spouting, and I think it's important that families like yourselves are out seeking additional information and educating yourselves, and we're going to talk about some further steps you can take to do that, some resources for you. But this is an important slide that the college education is a ticket to the middle class, is a ticket to financial stability in a way that nothing else in our country is. There's a reason why people haven't figured out how to export a college education. It's something that we as Americans do incredibly well. We're preparing the next generation of leaders in the world, the next generation of voters, and these things are the types of topics that are discussed on a college campus, and these are the types of things that inform and change how people view the world. That's pretty important. So on the next slide is just a bit of initial guidance. It's January. Your student likely is a senior in high school. Some of these things are this idea of practicing and preparing. You don't have a lot of time. We're going to talk a little bit in the future about the February 1st deadline that we have. Many schools do have some sort of financial aid deadline in that manner. But the first bullet point there is ask for help from university professionals. The word university is in that sentence, particularly because of the folks that are out there who claim to have the inside scoop or inside knowledge in ways that just simply aren't well informed and perhaps aren't even accurate. The next bit in the next few about doing your research, you're doing that tonight. That's a great opportunity. The last few are don't assume you can afford it. One of the things I mentioned earlier about the 40% of students that assume they can't afford it, those students by and large are going to do something called undermatching. They're going to make a decision on what they're going to do in the next part of their life, whether go to a 4-year school, a community college, or a regional institution, that'll impact the rest of their lives, their earning potential, their view of the world, these sorts of things. Assuming you can't afford it without doing your research, without having the complete picture in front of you, can damage that. And undermatching specifically means choosing university below your academic potential. And so you want to make sure you're being aspirational, that you're reaching to that next level, and positioning yourself for a long-term success. The last point there is apply early. That is a little bit misleading for us because we do have a February 1st deadline to apply for admission and financial aid. Excuse me, to apply for financial aid, priority scholarship deadline specifically for competitive scholarships. Tripped over that a little bit. Let me restate it. I'll cover it again in a minute. But applying early for admission and financial aid is important because we have a February 1st priority scholarship deadline. So those are all of our competitive awards. We gather that information from the applications and submit it to the colleges, those scholarship committees. So making sure you, or if you're a parent, your student has your application file complete. Transcript, 7th semester transcript, your application details filled out, your $40 application fee, the honors and awards received. These types of things are incredibly important to do. A lot of folks are asking a very simple question: what is financial aid? It's money, simply stated, it's money from outside the family that helps you pay for college. Many of us know the word scholarships. Those are, that's money that's based on your academic performance, grades, GPAs, your resume as a student, who you are, what you've done. Excuse me. There's also grants, similar to scholarships, which is basic money that does not have to be repaid. Scholarships are in the same manner. Loans are or loan rather, is the 4-letter word of our industry. The reality is that loans are a fact of life for an incredibly large number of students across the nation. Oklahoma State University is in that group, but loans for many, many students is an investment in themselves to allow them to achieve the goal that they need to achieve, or that they want to achieve, and that's paid back over time. Loans are investments, whether you're buying a house or what have you. College education should be viewed, in my opinion, as an investment. In student employment, we're going to get into this a little bit later on tonight, but working while you're a college student is a great way to help pay for college. Those hours work, that money in your pocket. I mentioned earlier that Oklahoma State is part of that group. There aren't very many people in this country who can write the check for their child's college education. There are those people that can write the check, and then there's the rest of us. On our campus, over $75 million of tuition waivers and scholarships were awarded. $300 million of financial aid was received by OSU students. You are in great company to be amongst the students receiving financial aid and scholarships on our campus, and that's the vast majority of students. Many folks are shouting out, wondering, hey, can you help me just, how do we apply for scholarships? And I realize I'm going through some very basic material right now, and I want to make sure that we're bringing everybody up to the same level before I get into some more complicated, more significant things. We'll be able to answer some specific questions later and get into some much more detail. So if you're thinking, hey, I've heard this before, I already know this, we'll get into some more specific detail in a little bit later. But we also have some folks that this is their first time joining us for something like this, so I want to make sure we're bringing everybody up. Applying for scholarships, what I cannot stress enough is your application for admission is your application for scholarships at Oklahoma State University. What that means in very, very simple ways is making sure that you are putting your best foot forward when it comes to your admission application, because not only is that part of the admissions process, it's also part of the scholarship process. So once you get admitted, we're going to put that information in a database, and then we're going to send it off to, after February 1st, to our scholarship committees around our campus. And so making sure that you've completed the application, you've submitted your 7th semester transcript from your high school, send us a resume of sorts, your honors and awards that you've received over time, making sure you've responded to the essay questions that we have. Very, very important that somebody reviews those essay questions, that you're answering the question to the best of your ability, that you're putting your best foot forward. It's very, very important that you do that. I've mentioned the February 1st priority scholarship deadline to this point. At this point, it is upon us. Just for a tangent for those of you who are thinking, well, it's the last week of January, February 1st is Saturday, postmarked. Materials that are postmarked by February 1st are considered meeting that deadline. So making sure that those things are postmarked, working with your high school, whether they're electronic transferring your transcript to us, sorry, or what have you, or you're putting it in the mail or faxing it to us, making sure that we're getting that postmark on there by February 1st. And then lastly, while we have that February 1st deadline, we're going to continue to take GPAs, activities, honors, and awards, and updated test scores until July 1st. On July 1st, we've got to close the books and get everybody awarded before the beginning of the school year. So making sure that you have all those updated materials to us. However, February 1st is the competitive scholarship deadline. So if you're a high achieving student or your son or daughter is high achieving, making sure we're getting the most updated information prior to February 1, because once that information goes out to the scholarship committees, they're going to begin making those decisions. Many people forget that there's other scholarships out there. One of the ways that we recommend is a website called fastweb.com. Be honest with you, it's kind of a junky looking website. It's got some banner ads, it's that sort of thing, but it's free and it's comprehensive. It's a great way to find out about those national resources out there that you may be eligible for certain demographics, or for certain types of students, students from a certain background, what have you. Also, make a trip down to your local guidance counselor, your high school guidance counselor's office. He or she should be a plethora of information about your local opportunities. Sometimes submitting materials just as right from the, just as you have for all your college applications, you may already have that material just to submit. Your parents' employers may have scholarship opportunities for every employee that has a high school senior, for example. Those are great. Those are great things to be aware of, because it may be $500, but that's $500 you don't have to come up with on your own, and many of them are cash scholarships. Lastly, particularly in other parts of the country, not so much in the Midwest, but in other parts of the country, there are organizations out there that, in my view, and many of my colleagues' views, are predatory. There should be no reason to pay for scholarship opportunities. There should be no reason to pay for somebody to do their research for you. Between your own initiative, your high school guidance counselor, and working with the university professionals, whether at Oklahoma State University's financial aid office or what have you, those opportunities are out there for you. You shouldn't have to pay for it. So I always like to mention that, because in certain states across the country, it's a very real issue. All right, we're going to get into the applying for federal aid. The FAFSA, which is the acronym, and I'll use the acronym FAFSA, but I'll tell you what it is first. It's the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It's on the screen. This is your application for all federal grants, loans, and work study. That's a program that helps students make some money while they're on campus. The FAFSA is a federal program. You indicate that you want to send it to various schools that you've applied to. You should have it sent to Oklahoma State. It's a very user-friendly interface. You can go on the website now. It started on January 1st. We now encourage, and this is one of the things I'd like you to hear from me tonight if you miss everything else, we now encourage all families, regardless of financial situation, to fill out the FAFSA. There's two very basic reasons why. In this day and age, life happens. Whether that's a specific change in your financial situation, marriage, birth, death, grandma, grandpa move in, what have you, your economic situation suddenly changes, pay reduction, layoff, what have you. Having that FAFSA on file, having the practice of having done it before is incredibly important. If you're a student, or if you're in college already and life happens, something has impacted your financial situation, and the taxes you filed for last year don't match what your current economic or financial situation is, you pick up the phone and you call us, call our financial aid office, and you say, hey, I'm going to need some additional help. Our very first question is likely going to be, did you file the FAFSA? Or we're going to look you up in the system to see if you filed the FAFSA. If the answer to that question is yes, then we're off to the races. We're going to ask for some additional documentation. We're going to work with you to the best of our ability to see if we can help you make those ends meet. If you call us and say, hey, my situation's changed, I'm going to need some additional help, and your response to that question is, the question, have you filed the FAFSA, is no, The next thing we're going to say to you is please go out and file the FAFSA. Delays the process, takes you a little while, you're not familiar with it, you got to get your documents in place. It just takes a little bit longer to have that reassurance that you've been taken care of. So regardless, I hear often, well, we make too much money, we don't, please file the FAFSA. If you're not familiar with it, you can go out and check it out and look at it. If you're familiar with it from an older child who went through the process, but it's been a couple of years, the process changes every year. There's the IRS download, which is new in the last couple of years, helps make things much more streamlined and much more straightforward. So the thing that I'd like you to hear is, regardless of your economic situation, your financial situation, please file a FAFSA and send it to us at your earliest convenience. If you do feel like you'll be eligible for need-based aid, those are limited dollars, first come, first serve. The FAFSAs that come in earlier are the ones that are going to address first. And some of those limited funds, work study is a big one, Pell Grant is another one. You're going to want to make sure that you get your FAFSA application completed as early as possible. All right, excuse me, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this slide because it reads a little bit like a Mad Lib if you're old enough to remember what those are, but it's an opportunity for just to reinforce many of the things I've come across or that I've talked about tonight. Submitting transcripts is is one that we seem to be getting a lot of questions on. Depending on where you live, if you live in Oklahoma, we have electronic means. Your school has electronic means to send those transcripts to us. Many of the high schools in Texas, Missouri, Kansas, the contiguous states have that opportunity as well. So visit your guidance office to make sure that make sure that they're sending those 7th semester transcripts to us. Applying early is a big part, although with the date that is today, early means tonight. Early means get going. If you've not been admitted to the university, making sure that this week you're taking the steps to ensure that you've been admitted to the university. Yes, I'm getting several questions about if I'm already admitted, do I need to submit my 7th semester transcript? The issue is that you want to make sure, it goes back to that question of putting your best foot forward, making sure that GPA on your 7th semester transcript is higher. That's going to make you better positioned. It may bump you into the next, make you eligible for a scholarship, particularly if you're from out of state. Our out of state tuition waiver has a GPA requirement. So if you are applied and were admitted, for example, with a 2.9 GPA, but your 7th semester of high school, you bump that over 3 point, you want to make sure we get that 7th semester transcript because suddenly you may be eligible for a scholarship you hadn't been eligible for before. Let me take an opportunity to read some of these questions. They're coming in pretty fast and furious. Katie's helping me organize. Oh, fantastic question about student retaking the ACT. We are an ACT school. We take SATs and ACT tests, and we just convert everything to an ACT score. However, for those of you from other states that are more focused on the SATs, we don't take the writing score off the SAT, just the math in the verbal, or what we used to call the verbal section, the reading section, not the writing section. So the 2 score total, which is the 1600, is the highest score you can get there. Let's talk for a moment about taking a test again. The testing agencies recommend, and we frankly agree with them, a high school student should take the test, ACT or SAT, in the spring of their junior year, April for most students, and then again in the fall of the senior year. Between those 2 scores, we're going to get a very accurate picture of the student's academic performance. By and large, we're not going to see, if a student takes the test a 3rd time, we're not going to see a variance from those 2 initial scores. However, if there is a reason why you think you did not put your best foot forward in one of those 2 tests, you were sick, it was the morning after the big football game, you were sitting next to a pretty girl and you got really distracted, whatever the issue is, or you've had tutoring, you've had additional coursework to support doing better in a particular area, there may be an opportunity for you to take the ACT or the SAT again to help you get a better score. However, we do not encourage students to just test and retest and retest and retest and retest because we don't see the return on that investment. It's an incredible amount of time invested, it's an incredible amount of money invested, and we just don't see the students, and the testing agencies agree, we just don't see the students bolster, bump that test score up and up and up. Generally, between the junior year and the senior year, with that added curriculum, we'll see a point or two perhaps, but rarely will we see 3, 4, 5 points. So submitting those test scores, making sure we have the most up-to-date test scores is incredibly important, but we don't recommend taking the test over and over and over again. You got to just reading through a couple of additional questions here. Okay, I think pretty much what we've got that's hot on the question board are things I'm about to cover here in a second. So let's move on to the next slide, please. We don't seem to be loading the next slide. There we go. There we go. Fabulous. Thank you. The federal government requires, so we're moving from applying for aid to getting a sense of what your costs will be. The federal government requires all universities to have a net price calculator. Many schools bury it. Many schools, and I'm going to go back to the FAFSA slide in a minute because some additional questions have popped up, but I'm going to finish covering the net price calculator, Katie, and then we're going to go back to the last slide. Net price calculator. Every university is required to have one. Some universities have buried their net price calculator. They're on page, click 7, click 8, and you've got to really dig for it. Doesn't even come up in their Google search, what have you. Oklahoma State University has made a conscious effort to put their net price calculator out front and center. It's an online resource. What is a net price calculator? It is an online resource for you to get a sense of what it's going to take, the cost associated with becoming a student at Oklahoma State University. It asks for some wage information, some asset information, number of dependents in the household, number of people in college, these sorts of things. It asks for some academic information to give you a sense of non-competitive scholarship eligibility, what have you. It gives you a very clear breakdown of what are you're from out of state, what are your costs, and then begins to subtract out the aid and things that you are likely going to be eligible for. It's not a definitive stamp guarantee, but it's just, the idea is to get you a snapshot. The idea is to give you an opportunity to compare our net price calculator to another school's net price calculator to give you some general assumptions. Again, the level of specificity is going to depend on the level of specificity you put into the net price calculator. So if you ballpark things, you're going to get a ballpark response, but if you're hyper specific, you're going to get a hyper specific response. Taking 15-20 minutes to get on our net price calculator, take a look at it, answer the questions, and see what those opportunities are is incredibly important. And a great opportunity, really. It's a great thing to do, first thing in the morning, or over a bowl of Cheerios and a cup of coffee or what have you. But if you're like me, it may take you 2 or 3 cups of coffee to get going in the morning. So maybe you might want to wait. So Katie, let's go back to the last slide and hammer on some of these questions about FAFSA, particularly FAFSA deadline. One more slide, I think, is where we want to be. There we go. Let's stay here for a second. FAFSA deadline. There is no technical deadline for the FAFSA. However, many of the need-based programs have very limited funding and are on a first-come, first-served basis. So you want to make sure you get it done as quickly as possible. We will download FAFSAs. Mid-February, once the federal government tells us we can, once we've run our testing and those sorts of things, and begin to work on those and get that information out. I'm going to read a question here real quick. Why do they require you to submit it? Sorry, I'm trying to read through a question. I want to make sure I understand the question in its entirety. So the question is about a divorced parent situation. The FAFSA is going to ask you some questions about, if you are divorced, about the living situation for the student. In danger of getting hyper wonky on it or policy on it, the FAFSA is dependent, the FAFSA information, the parent information in the FAFSA is dependent on how much of the year the student spends with a parent. For example, if the student spends 51% of their time with one parent over the other, the parent that has the 51% share of that custody is responsible for putting their information on the FAFSA. That's how it works. It's a federal program, and that's the determination they met. Another thing not asked in that particular question, but I get a lot is, I have custody, I'm divorced, I have custody of my son, but I've remarried. Does my new spouse, who's not the parent, do we have to include that income? The answer to that question is yes. I often get, but part of my prenup says that, unfortunately, it's the way the federal government has written the rules. So 51% of that household's income, and so that new spouse is part of that household, and the income in the assets that need to be incorporated in that. And so I'm not going to go into a lot more specificity for that, because it gets into some things that are really specific to the situation. Sorry, I'm trying to read Aaron's note to me, and I don't necessarily understand it, but we'll try again. The divorced parent situation is 51%. More than half of the student's time is spent with that parent. That means that parent's income, assets, information goes on the FAFSA, as opposed to the parent that is less than half time. That's a conversation that often happens at the family level. Great question about change of financial situation, particularly job loss is the question that was put out there. Really, what you're asking is saying, for this year, my 2013 taxes say I make X. My current situation is I make X minus a lot less. How does that take into account? Oklahoma State University has the opportunity to do what we call internally we call it professional judgment. I'm escaping what the formal word for it is, but it's an opportunity to make some adjustments to what the FAFSA says based on the student's current situation. So 2013, both parents fully employed, taxes are filed with both parents fully employed. 2014, suddenly one of the parents is no longer employed. For equity's sake, say that the family's income is cut in half at that point. Reaching out to us saying, I've submitted my FAFSA, however, that does not indicate what our current financial situation is. Our office is empowered to ask you some very specific questions to say, okay, what is the situation? They very well might ask you to provide some documentation, and then they can make some adjustments based on your current situation. And so that requires an engagement, whether that's making an appointment and coming to Stillwater if you're in-state, whether that's a forum where you can call in and make an appointment, or just simply reaching out to our financial aid office. Those changes are unique in case-by-case basis, but it's important that you're doing the FAFSA and reaching out to us and saying, hold on a minute, our situation's changed, let me make sure that we've got the picture accurately. So we've got our, it's really against certain FAFSA prior to having tax information. Okay, I'm reading a question about a high school guidance counselor recommending against turning in the FAFSA prior to having all tax information. The FAFSA allows estimation, cause many unnecessary problems. We do recommend, whether it's because you file quarterly, whether it's because you don't have all your documents ready, for any number of reasons that you've delayed filing your taxes, we do recommend that you estimate. There's a caveat there, because estimating requires, one, that you go in once you've done your taxes and make those corrections, and two, that you keep, as one of my bullet points earlier indicated, keep an eye on your email, keep an eye on the communication that we reach out to you, because we'll reach out for corrections, we'll reach out for verification if you don't go out and do those updates on those estimates. And so I know there are some high school guidance counselors and some secondary education professionals out there that don't recommend estimating. However, we just don't find that the case, and that families that estimate and stay with the process and complete the process don't experience the unnecessary problems that are identified because they're staying proactive, they're completing the process. Many of the problems we see out there are folks that just do the estimates and then don't do anything else and just sit back. So hopefully that addressed that concern. Let me bang out a couple of more questions. Or we can move on to some other slides. I'm going to take a drink real quick. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm rocking a pretty good head cold, so apologize for all the throat clearing tonight. Okay, we're just sorting through. We have hundreds of questions to bang through, but we're going to take a pause.
Go back and finish. And we'll
Yeah, sure. We'll go back to some of these questions. Let us get a little organized and tag some themes. That way we're addressing the most people at a time. The FAFSA, the financial aid website rather, is right there. Information is there. All types of guidance, instruction, what have you, those sorts of things. Next slide, please, Katie. Managing costs. This is a slide that a lot of folks are pretty focused on. It's really for a student about to enter the process, i.e. walk onto a campus. It is one that is incredibly important, but if you're a high school senior taking concurrent, doing concurrent classes, not really very helpful in the spring of your senior year. Enrolling in an AP class, taking an AP test, if you haven't done it already, not tremendously helpful. However, if you are a parent of a junior or you are a high school junior, these things are incredibly important, allow you to come to campus with credits under your belt, better prepared for college, the rigors of college curriculum. So whether you take AP Calculus in high school, take the AP exam, and still choose to take Calc 1 on our campus or on the college campus, you're better prepared. Or if you did very well in that program, you're feeling prepared already, moving on to the second section, forgive me, or taking the honors section is a great way to do that. But basically this slide is about choice. You have, every college student chooses how they spend their money, whether it's living in an apartment or living in a traditional residence hall, you and a roommate with a washroom down the hall. Higher density, the more students that live in a residence hall, the more cost effective it's going to be for you. Not needing the best, the brightest, the most up-to-date fashion, the most up-to-date technology, rather borrowing that technology from the university at the library, what have you, is a great way to reduce the cost of being a college student. But your family, you've had this conversation, hopefully you know what types of issues that are at hand, or what type of opportunities you have to manage cost. And it's particularly, I'd like to identify here that we refer to it as managed costs, not cutting costs. And so it's managing that process and making sure that you're taking those steps to put you in the right place that you need to. I alluded to this earlier today, and all my faculty, friends, and colleagues across campus will thank me for it, and thank me for it every time they have the opportunity. But having a job when you're on campus can be an incredibly fundamental part of the college experience. Students who work while they're college students, work in college, have a higher GPA on average and a higher retention rate than students who don't. In high school, you go to school 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, you're in school all day, you got practice after school, you're managed, your time is managed for you. In college, that situation changes. You're in 3 classes, maybe it's Monday, Wednesday, 2 on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but nothing on Tuesday, Thursday, what have you. These are great opportunities to get a part-time job, work a little bit, get involved in a different way on campus, make some spending money, make some money to put towards your education, what have you, whatever your situation is. working while you're a college student can help you build your resume, help cover costs. As somebody who hires recent graduates, one of the very first things I look for is, did the student work in college? Great, they had a 3.8 GPA, did they have a job? What have you. It's whether it's working in dining services, whether it's working in the admissions office as a tour guide or as one of our call center students, working on campus is a great way. The employers are very student friendly. They understand studying for tests. They understand the life of a student. They understand that you're a student worker. You're a student first and then you're a worker, whether it's on our campus or in our community. An incredibly high percentage of students on our campus work while they're a student, and so it's incredible. It's an incredible way to have a different aspect of a college experience. It's an incredibly good way to put some money in your pocket. It's an incredible way to manage your time. But most importantly, as we talk about return on investment, you're out in the job market with resume material. You're out in the job market with, hey, I showed up, I did what was asked of me, and that's pretty good thing to be able to talk about in a job interview. Also, the last thing I'll mention is a lot of scholarships are out there for your junior and senior year, or your sophomore year. Retention scholarships, as they're referred to, perhaps in the industry. Getting good grades is a great way to retain scholarships. So I know we've moved on to the Oklahoma Promise slide. I know we have a lot of folks from states other than Oklahoma. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Oklahoma Promise tonight, predominantly because it's a state program that Oklahoma State Oklahoma State is a part of, and it doesn't apply to the out-of-state folks. But I am going to talk about it, and we can answer some questions at the end, so we can hammer on it with the Oklahoma students. Oklahoma's Promise, if you don't know what it is, and you're an in-state student or an in-state parent and you've not heard of it, unfortunately, the way the legislation is written, it's too late. You needed to have applied for it in 8th, 9th, or 10th grade and gotten into the process then. However, if you were lucky enough to go to a school that encouraged it, required it, gave you the guidance to apply for it, it's a great way. It's a great state-based aid program that's a cash award that helps pay for the cost of tuition. It is FAFSA dependent, so you have to have a FAFSA on file. And so there is a need-based requirement for it. So you will not get your Oklahoma's Promise scholarship without submitting the FAFSA. It's the one thing, and that's new. So if you've had an older student, or new in the last couple of years rather, if you have an older student that went through the process on Oklahoma's Promise and didn't, I want to make sure that that may be different from what you previously experienced. Oklahoma's Promise is a need-based program. It's money that does not have to be repaid, and it can be combined with other scholarships and tuition waivers. So if you've got scholarships and tuition waivers that cover your cost of attendance, that additional Oklahoma Promise money can be used for other things on campus. So it's a pretty powerful way to help pay for college for our Oklahoma students on our campus. Cowboy Covenant is Oklahoma State's commitment to those Oklahoma Promise students. It's a very straightforward program. If you're eligible for Oklahoma Promise and you meet all those requirements, you're going to get $1,000 a year from OSU. You must remain eligible, and you must file the FAFSA and show the financial need requirements that are required for Oklahoma's Promise. So Cowboy Covenant is OSU's commitment to the success of Oklahoma Promise students on our campus. We have a very, very high, amongst our in-state students, a very high percentage of students receiving Oklahoma Promise, one of the highest, if not the highest in the state. So it's a population of students we're very, very proud of as they are successful on our campus. The last thing is, it's one of the things I started with. Reaching out to university professionals is a great way to navigate this process. No question is too simple, no process is too complex for us to get additional help for you. All of our information is there. The one thing I do want to mention, whether it's email, whether it's over the phone, whether it's walk-ins, all of the folks that you visit with are financial aid professionals. They employ a ton of students in their office, but the person you're sitting across from is a person who's gone through not only intense training, has an in-depth knowledge of the rules and regulations and the policies and the procedures, but it's their job to sit across the table from you, sit on the phone with you, what have you, and have these types of conversations with prospective students, current students, all the way through undergraduate, graduate school. So they're not only are they a friendly bunch of folks, but they are incredibly smart, incredibly motivated, and it's part of their mission to make college as accessible for as many people as possible. The last thing I want to mention, I've used the term investment over and over and over tonight, and I can't say it enough, that choosing to attend a Research One institution, a four-year school, is an incredibly good way to set yourself up for long-term financial stability, long-term health. College graduates are growing in population, and so when we talk about employment, when we talk about financial stability, when we talk about the likelihood that you'll be unemployed for an extended period of time, all these things are bolstered, helped by having a college degree and being out in the workforce and being a productive member of our society. Whether you're an accounting major, an art history major, ag sciences, what have you, a college degree will change your life in ways that I don't think should be underestimated. We're going to take some time here to answer a number of your questions. We've swelled to a lot of participants. I know many of you were unable to join us at the beginning. And so what we're going to do now is spend some time going through some of these questions with Katie and Aaron's help to get these things, get as many of the questions answered. We're going to do it thematically. I won't call anyone out, so feel free to ask whatever specific question you'd like. I did mention at the beginning that we're keeping a copy of who's asked what question. So if we don't get to your question, or we don't, or your question is too specific for the larger group, your question is too specific for the larger group, maybe only pertain to a handful of people, we're going to do some outreach to you, but feel free to reach out to us as well. Say, hey, I was on the webinar last night with Ben, didn't get my question answered, so make sure that you want to get that answered with the contact information we provided in the previous slide. One of the basic questions I didn't cover right at the beginning, and I'm sorry about that, is will we get a copy of the presentation? The answer to that question is yes. We're going to email that out to everyone who logged in, so making sure you use the email account that was live and one that you check. That's pretty important. The next question I'm going to cover, and we're going to go kind of a little hodgepodge here, so it's not going to be real coherent from question to question, but I'll go in depth as I need to. The question here is the February 1st deadline the deadline for the FAFSA? Our February 1st deadline is our competitive scholarship deadline. That means that those scholarships that me, you, and Johnny over there are all eligible for, but only one of us is going to get it, that's the Feb 1 deadline. The FAFSA deadline is a do it as soon as possible. There is no technical deadline, but there are some competitive scholarships out there that require the FAFSA be on file. So in language terms, we bundle them together, applying, getting admitted, beating the Feb 1 deadline, submitting your FAFSA, all with that Feb 1 deadline in mind, because it's important that those two things happen very, very, very quickly and very together. However, for total transparency, there is not a FAFSA deadline, but there's pretty limited funds, so we want to make sure excuse me, we're cracking jokes over here. We want to make sure that you're eligible for everything that you're competitive for, whether it's need-based aid from the FAFSA or a competitive scholarship. So while there isn't a deadline for FAFSA specifically, we strongly encourage you to file it as soon as possible. Are there any scholarships? Excuse me. Are there any scholarships at OSU that are not listed on your website? Our website is a comprehensive list of the scholarship opportunities at OSU. That does not mean that there might be one or two scholarships out there that are brand new and the website simply isn't updated. There may be scholarships out there. For example, many of our alumni chapters have scholarships for local students. They have their own application process. So reaching out to your local alumni chapter to ask, hey, do you have scholarships? If you don't know who your local alumni chapter might be, Our Alumni Association has that list on their website. OrangeConnections.org and follow the links for scholarships, and you'll find out if your local alumni chapter has scholarships. And so the question is, it's making sure you're taking advantage of all of those steps. Great question about work study. Thank you because I glossed over some of the details of work study, so thank you for everyone who's asking questions about work study. Very, very important difference. There is a federal program called work study. It is a need-based program that's derived from demonstrating financial need on the FAFSA. Basically, what that means is, as a student employer, a student that is a federal work study student, part of their wages are going to be paid by the federal government, and part of the wages are going to be paid by the university. However, you do not need to be a federal work study eligible student to have a job on our campus. Occasionally it helps. There are departments who can't afford to hire 2 students, but if they hire 2 work study students because the federal government pays part of their wages, they can hire 2 students. There are also departments like mine that being a work study student, federal work study student, is a benefit, but it's not determinate. So it means that to get an on-campus job, no, you don't need to be eligible for federal work study, but it does factor in for some positions. Your options would be a little more. So as you navigate our process, we have a great website and a facility that the higher OSU grads that helps students on our campus find jobs. And so there's some information on there you can put in there for your federal work study. And so demonstrating that may give you a leg up. It may not, depending on what job you're applying for. Do we need to make an appointment to come to financial aid, or can we just show up? If you're close to Stillwater and you want to walk in, by all means, they have walk-in staff available and those sorts of things. You can also make an appointment. If you're on limited time, you can make an appointment. Call them, make an appointment, email them, make an appointment. Very, very easy. You can have multiple appointments to follow up with the same individual. Excuse me. Totally forgot where I was going with that. But yes, you can make an appointment. You don't have to. You can do walk-ins, particularly when the Feb 1 deadline is coming up. Predominantly, you're going to want to, for the February 1st deadline, you're going to want to work with the admissions office to make sure your application file is complete. Financial aid folks, if you call them, they'll transfer you to my office, and our talented staffers will look at your record, make sure all your documents are in place, make sure we've got everything that we need, what have you. Question out there, a number of questions about what is a tuition waiver? Scholarship, we use the term on our campus, scholarship and tuition waiver, interchangeably. Basically, a scholarship is money put into your account, as it were. Sometimes it's cash, sometimes it's deposited against a bill, but that's a money that is there to, it's a cash dollar amount that you use to offset your costs. A tuition waiver is like a coupon. So it's as simple as, if you're eligible for the $10,000 non-resident achievement scholarship, which is a tuition waiver, you're simply not going to be charged that dollar amount on your bill. So it's like a voucher or a coupon. I know that cheapens it quite a bit, particularly when we're talking about that kind of money. But that's the most simplistic way I can say it. Scholarships like a debit card. You can use it to offset costs, pay part of your bill, what have you. Whereas a tuition waiver is more like a coupon or a voucher that says, okay, we're simply not going to be charged that amount of tuition. Do we have to have our 2013 taxes filed? We talked about this a little earlier, and I'll hit it again because a number of people are coming up with questions about it. Particularly, no, the federal tax, you can complete the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, at FAFSA, F-A, I'm not going to try to do the letters, the website's in the presentation, at FAFSA.gov. You can use estimated taxes. By and large, Most folks, and I know I get in trouble saying most folks, their taxes don't change radically from one year to the next. You can go in and estimate and submit those estimates to us. However, you have to go back and submit your final taxes as soon as you have them. And so having your 2013 taxes finished, not necessary. If they are, great. Use the IRS download. Go ahead and do that. Do your taxes as soon as possible. Don't wait until February 15th, what have you. But if you file quarterly, you've got something fairly unusual or non-traditional in your taxes, you can do estimates. But the key is making sure you're going back and submitting the finals. The freshmen, so hopefully that clears up that question. Can freshmen participate in the work-study program? Again, a nuanced detail. Freshmen can work on campus. Actually, it's a great way for a student to get grounded on our campus, is to have a job. And when it comes to the federal work-study program, which is a need-based program, which is a need-based program, yes, freshmen, it's based on what you submit on the FAFSA. If you're eligible for federal work-study, freshmen can receive it. But when we talk about working on our campus, being a student employee, a student worker, yes, freshmen can do that as well. Oh, this is a great question. So thank you for those of you who are asking it. I'm frankly surprised it's not on the tip of my tongue. We have a multi-step scholarship notification process, and this is what is very, very important. You will be admitted, and after you are admitted, you are evaluated for non-competitive scholarships. That's already happening. So if you're from out of state and you've already been admitted, you have already likely heard from us about your eligibility for the non-resident achievement scholarship. If you're an in-state student, there's a number of different opportunities for non-competitive scholarships that are based on your academic criteria, academic profile that you'd be notified about. The next step to that process is doing the FAFSA. That's making sure that you've putting your best foot forward, making sure that you've doing the free application for federal student aid. And then the third step is around tax day, although it's usually the last week in March, but keep tax day in your mind. If you did the FAFSA, you will get what we refer to as a comprehensive award letter. That is all your non-competitive scholarships, should you be eligible for any, all your competitive scholarships, should you be eligible for any, as well as any need-based grant or loan opportunities, should you be eligible. So when we talk about the importance of doing a FAFSA, the FAFSA for us will also generate that comprehensive award letter. If you don't do the FAFSA, the comprehensive award letter isn't there, so you'll get sort of a hodgepodge of things. But making sure that you do the FAFSA and expect to get a comprehensive award letter from us late March, but predominantly, I don't want to make any promises because it depends on a number of different variables that are outside of our control, particularly when dealing with the federal government, making sure that you're checking your inbox in your OKey account because that's where you'll see it first, is in your inbox in your OKey account. We do mail paper letters, so it will hit your mailbox eventually, yeah, tax day, basically, if you haven't gotten one by then, reach out to us. All right, next question. And these are great questions, guys, and so keep them coming. We'll stick with this as long as we can. My family information, see if I'm qualified for scholarships. Why am I forced to do this? You're not, well, okay, so sorry, I'm going to repeat the question because I had to read through it. It's a fairly long question, but I think it's an important one to cover, so thanks for asking it. My FAFSA indicates, the FAFSA requires that you submit some very detailed family information, demographics, how many people are in the household, how many people are in college, asset questions, those sorts of income, those sorts of things. The questioner, there's some people asking, well, I know that my family makes, that I'm not going to have any eligibility, thank you, Katie, due to my family's income. Why am I forced to do this? No one is forced to do the FAFSA. It is a volunteer process. However, as I talked earlier about, perhaps this questioner wasn't able to join us for this piece, we now encourage all families, regardless, where there's encourage, all families, regardless of financial situation, to fill out the FAFSA Perhaps you're not eligible for anything right now. Perhaps there is some eligibility there that you're unaware of, particularly one that families get caught up in is they've got one student in college and they do the FAFSA and they're not eligible for any need-based aid, and then they have a second student in college. Suddenly that estimated family contribution, or EFC, gets split between two students instead of one. Suddenly there's some additional additional need there. Need is demonstrated on the FAFSA, and the family is pleasantly surprised. You don't know until you've done it. Also, the federal algorithm changes from year to year. While you may not be eligible one year, you may be eligible another year. And so doing it year over year is incredibly important. Also, you may not be eligible, you may not choose to take advantage of the loan opportunities that are outlined there. However, doing it, getting in the habit of doing it, getting in the practice of doing it, should your situation change, is incredibly important. And I know I went over that a little bit earlier, but I think it very much bears repeating, that making sure you have the practice and making sure you have the FAFSA in place should something change, should life happen, as we say, birth, death, layoff, wage decrease, grandma, grandpa moving into the home, meaning more dependence in the household, divorce, what have you. That's why we encourage it. But to answer your question directly, we don't require it. We do strongly encourage it, however. Great question about what kind of information do you need ready to fill out the FAFSA form. The FAFSA itself takes 15 or 20 minutes, assuming you have all your documents in place and the things. It's a very similar process. I'll get in a little trouble saying this, but it's similar to doing your taxes. You need your W-2s, you need some statements, you need access to your checking account, those sorts of things. Assets, wage, earnings, those types of things. Most of the questions are things that most folks, keyword there, most folks know or have easy access to, particularly when we talk about the IRS download. So if you can do your taxes first, 2013 taxes first, use the IRS data retrieval tool is technically what it's called. And you can pull in a lot of that information that pre-populates, then you don't have to go through box by box and fill that out. Also, the IRS federal data retrieval tool has reduced the error rate and therefore our need to verify tremendously. So it's a great tool to make sure that your FAFSA gets submitted error-free or as close to perfect as possible. Great question. I mentioned earlier, that our application for admission is our application for scholarships, in that a complete application file composed of a $40 application fee or application fee waiver, a completed application, honors and awards received, and the essay questions, high school transcript, and test score are the four things that are required to have a completed application. Are they required to be? Are all of those things required? I think there may be a scenario where they're not, but I don't want to encourage you to have an incomplete file, because part about having a complete file and all of that up-to-date information means you're putting your best foot forward to the competitive scholarship committees. If you were admitted over the summer as part of our Applying in July program, First to Apply program, but your GPA went up in your senior year, or you took the ACT again and you got a better score, and you don't submit that updated information to us, we're going to be making, our scholarship committees are going to be making scholarship determinations based on not the most up-to-date information. So making sure that you have those pieces in place, while not every single time absolutely required for every step, still not a smart move to step forward into the scholarship process without the most up-to-date information, without a complete file. So it's not, hopefully that answers the question. AP classes in the spring of senior year, not useful. Great clarification question. I really appreciate you asking it. What I meant by that statement is that if a student has yet to engage in AP classes, if they're just coming to this presentation and going, oh, I could enroll in AP classes, they've already enrolled for the spring in high school. You can't go back and enroll in an AP class your senior year if you've already in the spring. If you're a high school junior or the parent of a junior, absolutely. AP courses are or can be a very fundamental part of the senior year, spring semester included, particularly when we talk about taking the AP exam, getting those 3s, 4s, and 5s that allow you to opt out of taking some of the prerequisite or freshman classes that we have on our campus. So yes, AP classes are valuable, but at this point in the senior year, if the student isn't already engaged in that process, isn't already enrolled in that class, there really isn't the option for those students who aren't enrolled. So if your student or you are enrolled in an AP class and you are a high school senior, absolutely, AP classes are in those AP exams are absolutely worth it. We're getting a lot of questions about applying. Applying for admission is an online process, and as I mentioned earlier, applying for admission is admissions application is the scholarship application, and presenting yourself with a complete application file for the scholarship process prior to the Feb 1 deadline is important. So I'm going to talk about applying to the university very, very briefly. Admissions.okstate.edu. Apply Now button will take you to our online application. It's an online process. There's some very it's a smart app, so you're not going to have to wade through questions that don't pertain to you. If you answer a question that says, yes, I'm Native American, it's going to ask for your tribal affiliation, what have you. So it's going to be a very straightforward process for you, easy to navigate, not very complex process. However, completing your document, getting your documents to us, many high schools out there include the test score on your transcript, but making sure that your high school includes the transcript, includes the test score on the transcript is particularly important. Sometimes our out-of-state friends get tripped up by that. But making sure that you've completed the admissions application, paid the $40 application fee, submitted your test scores in your transcripts prior to the Feb 1 deadline will put you in the running for all of our competitive scholarships, freshman competitive scholarships on our campus. After the Feb 1 deadline, you missed the Feb 1 deadline, what have you, got a buddy who doesn't get off the mark and you want to go to college together, still time to apply, still time to get admitted, still some great scholarship opportunities. But to get everybody to the starting line at the same place, we've got to get that Feb 1 piece in place. This is one of my favorite questions to get because it's, I've worked for Oklahoma State now for almost 7 years, and I continue to get this question, particularly for our out-of-state friends. The question of in-state tuition for out-of-state students, particularly for OSU legacies or graduates of Oklahoma State. We do not offer we do not offer in-state tuition to out-of-state students. It's the process of which in-state tuition is determined is legislated to us by the state. We don't, while there is a petition process for it, very, very few students successfully navigate. Yeah, can you bring that question you were just pointing up? I'll hit that one next. Thank you. Sorry, I had to sidebar with one of my colleagues. In-state tuition for out-of-state students, whether a legacy parent is an OSU grad or not, isn't going, or by and large, isn't going to be a possibility. However, that's why we have the non-resident achievement scholarship for our out-of-state students. It is a great way, based on your GPA and your test score, to reduce the cost of attendance coming to us from out-of-state. Depending on where you're from and your test score, you may be able to come to Oklahoma State as an out-of-state student for cheaper than it is for you to go in-state at home. And so making sure that you're comparing apples to apples and using some resources to make sure you're doing that. So the non-resident achievement scholarship is a great way to reduce the cost of attendance. Information is on our website, but very, very briefly, requires a 3.0 unweighted GPA, and then we look at the test score, 24 and above, at what opportunities we have, how much, so the higher the test score, the more money we're going to waive as a tuition waiver. The other caveat, if the student has a parent or grandparent, step-parent or step-grandparent, but does not qualify for the non-resident achievement scholarship, there's a very good chance they'll be eligible for the Legacy Award, which is a scholarship for students who are legacies, whose parent or grandparent step-parent, or step-grandparent who are graduates of Oklahoma State to get some additional scholarship help. And all of that information is available on our website. It's called the Legacy Award and the Non-Resident Achievement Scholarship. Will OSU accept the Texas Tomorrow Fund, and will I still have to pay out-of-state tuition? First, for our friends from Texas who are part of the Texas Tomorrow Fund, yes. That arrangement with the Texas Tomorrow Fund is done through our Bursar's office. If you're unfamiliar with what a Bursar office is, basically it's the accounting office. Every university has one. Most universities call it the Bursar office, but it's the organization that runs the billing system, generates how much to charge each student, those sorts of things. So your Texas Tomorrow Fund runs through your Bursar account, and that money flows in that way. It's not as a scholarship, but it is a way that you can use some of that Texas Tomorrow Fund, and it is a great way our Texas students across campus utilizing that money. Yes, the gentleman was asking about coming from Texas. Oftentimes I'll get questions from families that live along the Red River or out on the Panhandle, but on the Texas side. Some universities have a tuition reciprocity, meaning if you live within 20 miles, you get in-state tuition, but if you live within 25 miles, you don't. We don't have that type of discrepancy. We don't have that type of program. Our non-resident achievement scholarship is our way to help our out-of-state students reduce the cost of attending. We have our current undergraduate population is about 27% out of state and growing. We have all 50 states represented and 129 countries on our campus this year. Coming to Oklahoma State University is part of being a nationally recognized university. So it's I know there are some very good questions floating out there about non-resident tuition and those additional costs, but we have the non-resident achievement scholarship and some other aid opportunities out there. Let me sort through some of these questions here with my colleagues. Yeah, that one's pretty specific, and I don't want to burn up a ton of time here. We've had some great questions, guys. Keep them coming in. We're still about 300 people joining us tonight, so thank you. And we're running right on time, honestly, so we're looking pretty good. I'm going to take a drink here. And click on the, okay, wait. Here's a question. How do you know if your student is eligible for federal work study? The net price calculator is a great way to look at that initially. Going on the net price calculator asks for some asset information, some income information, and it'll give you a general picture of what your aid opportunities are. Federal work study may be a part of that. So utilizing the net price calculator, if you want to know tonight, get a sense of, is that something we may be eligible for? The federal work study program is a limited funds program, so you want to make sure that, again, it's based on first come, first serve, and on need. So those students who demonstrate need earliest are going to have access to those funds before those students who applied later. Can you resubmit? This is a great question. Resubmitting essay answers. I get this one a lot. The students sort of dashed them off without thinking about it, and then suddenly they realize, oh, maybe answering that question that way wasn't necessarily putting my best foot forward. Or they learned later, I didn't realize those were going to be used for scholarships. Resubmitting essay questions is possible once, and so submitting those to us through our admissions.okstate.edu email, including your name and your birth date, so make sure we match it to the correct record, is the most simple and straightforward way to do that. Attaching it to the email as a Word file, as a Word document, is pretty straightforward. You can cut and paste it into the body of the email as well, but we prefer the attachment. Oh, great question about super scoring. Actually, can you go back to that one? There was a second question. I want to make sure that if you can't, that's fine. There it is. Particularly for those students out of state, particularly from Arkansas and some of our Deep South guests with us tonight, I do get it. Not very many schools super score anymore, and I'll tell you what super scoring is. Super scoring is a methodology when, predominantly with the ACT, is looking at all of the test scores from all of the ACT tests the student took and combining the highest subject scores into a new score. So creating the super great score above everything else. Oklahoma State University and vast majority of schools across the country don't super score. Oklahoma State University is going to look at your highest test score, not your most recent, not your first, but your highest. So if you ended up taking the test 3 times and you're afraid that first test score is going to hurt you, no harm, no foul. We're only going to look at the highest test score. And so we're also not going to go back if you take the test again and at the next national date and you don't do as well. That's fine. We're going to only look at that highest test score. And so we don't super score, but we do look at the highest test score that a student was able to achieve across the bandwidth of all others. So the comprehensive score, what people call the comp score on the ACT, or the 2-score total on the SAT, that's the 1600 maximum, is what we're going to look at. All right, regarding the non-resident scholarship, SAT again is 10 points away from the next level. Great question. I do get this question a lot. It's about taking the ACT or the SAT again, particularly for those students that are right on the cusp, maybe 10 points shy of the next level of the non-resident achievement scholarship and the next level of a particular scholarship. I caution just testing for the sake of testing. The math, frankly, is against you. If it's 1 point on the ACT, maybe. If you've got tutoring underneath your belt that you didn't have the last time you took it, additional curriculum, full semester mathematics, that sort of thing, you feel that you didn't put your best foot forward when you took it again, or you took it previously, these are the scenarios where I'm going to encourage you to take the test again. If you had sound tests with sound background, the test scores are very close together, but you're 3-4 points away from the next level, probably not. I'm probably going to encourage you not to take the test again. It's a decision made at the family level, absolutely. But when we talk about the amount of time and money that's put into taking the ACT, and frankly, when we see national averages running 4, 5, 6 times, depending on the state, that's really troubling. That's a lot of time on Saturday mornings taking the exam, and we're not seeing the return on the investment. However, if you do take the exam again and you do qualify for the higher level, and you send those scores to us prior to July 1st, for the non-competitive scholarships, like the non-resident achievement waiver, we will reevaluate you for that next level. If you're looking to if you've got a 20 on the ACT and you're looking to make a 4-point jump, the math is not in your favor at that point of making a jump that significant, unless there's a reason for it, tutoring, coursework, those sorts of things. Great question about, is the FAFSA info taken into consideration for competitive scholarships? There are so many competitive scholarships on our campus and nationally, I don't want to answer this question definitively. I will say that there are some scholarships that require the FAFSA be on file. Some scholarships just has to be there because they do some modeling and some demographic testing and to whom they award. Some scholarships require it because they're only going to cover the need gap, meaning if you have an unmet need of $5,000, the scholarship is going to be worth $5,000 to you because that's what the FAFSA said your need gap is. But there are also many, many competitive scholarships out there that FAFSA is not even looked at as part of the process. The question, so anyway, so moving on to the next question, can 6 semester grades be used for competitive scholarships? The answer is yes. You don't have to have a 7th semester transcript. However, most students do well their senior year, do well that that fall semester, and so making sure that if you did do well, it's a great way to make sure you're putting your best foot forward and making sure your application file is as up to date as possible. The scores you sent, do you need to resubmit them or they already be on file? You want to make sure, so here's the question. The question is, if I already sent you my test scores and I took the test again, are you going to get that test score again? And I'm not 100% sure on this question, so I'm going to be, and maybe somebody can look it up on the ACT website for me. One of the testing agencies sends us all your scores, and one of the testing agencies only sends us the ones that you tell them to send us. And for the life of me, I've got a 2-year-old. I was up with her last night in the middle of the night, so I'm not exactly on point on this. One of them is one way, and one of them is the other way. And for the life of me, I can't remember which one is which. And so you want to go out to their website to make sure that if you did take the ACT, that if they're if memory serves, they're the ones that send us every test score, that you're in good shape. But you want to make sure you verify that with the testing agency. But also verify with your high school that they're including all of your test scores on your transcript. In Oklahoma, that's very, very, very common. Matter of fact, it's easier to identify the schools that don't, but in other states, less so. There's a question about dual enrollment from out of state. Yes, dual enrollment basically, or what we in Oklahoma call concurrent enrollment, is you took college classes as a high school student and you got high school credit for it, as well as you want to use it for college credit. That evaluation, those grades count when we talk about admissions criteria, as well as scholarship eligibility, as well as those classes and those grades count when we talk about enrolling in classes in academic advising. And so we'll look, we have a table that tells us your course 1, 2, 3, 4 at this school counts as course 5, 6, 7, 8 at our school, and we can help you navigate that. But predominantly that conversation happens at the advisement point as part of new student orientation. So we're only going to spend a couple more minutes taking questions, and I know there are a number of questions we did not get to specifically, but again, we're going to do some outreach and do some things after this if your question was too specific or you didn't feel that my answer was adequate. Hopefully it was, but perhaps it wasn't, I didn't land on something as clearly as you'd hoped. Feel free to give us a ring, shoot us an email, what have you. But just another question or two, and then we're going to let people go for the night. Yes, great question. I mentioned numerous times, your admission application is your scholarship application. And so once you've been admitted and your file is complete, once your file is complete and you've been admitted, we go ahead and push the button and push that information down to the scholarship committees. And so you don't need to do anything else to make that happen, is the specific question that the audience member is asking. Do I need to do anything else to make sure those committees get my information? However, if you indicated that you want to be in the business college and you want to be an accounting major, if the accounting program has freshman scholarships that you may be eligible for, they're going to look at your materials, but the art department is not going to look at your materials because you said you wanted to be an accounting major. So your application is dependent, who reviews your scholarship application is dependent by what you put on your application and what your intended major is. You don't have to pick a major, you can pick undecided. You can pick undecided in a college, meaning undecided in business, or you can pick undecided. Truly, you're really not sure what you want to do, and that's fine. You may, the piece here I want to land on, however, if you had applied in September or October and you put undecided, or undecided business or undecided engineering, and you have since made, hey, I want to be an accounting major, but when I applied, I said I was undecided. Making sure you're making that correction on the application by sending us an email, pardon me, by sending us an email saying, hey, I would like to indicate a major. That way that ensures that if there's a scholarship that you're eligible for in that area, they get that scholarship. So if you know you want to be an accounting major, but you didn't indicate that on your application that you were admitted under, that accounting committee, if you're eligible for their scholarships, wouldn't review your materials because you didn't tell them that you wanted to be an accounting major. This is the last question we're gonna take tonight. Again, if we didn't get your question, or you have additional questions, or you want follow up, or you feel I didn't handle something or answer something particularly as clear, by all means, reach out to us. But we're also going to be doing some follow up with some individuals from our guest list that have joined us tonight. I don't necessarily understand this question here.
Application just for scholarships or for admissions?
Okay, great question, and thank you for the clarification, because Erin's reading all of the questions and then just showing me one as a prompt. So thanks for the clarification, Erin. The February 1st priority scholarship deadline is for our competitive scholarships. You have to be admitted to be considered for the Feb 1 priority scholarship deadline. However, we do what we call rolling admission, so we admit students all along the way. So if you don't get admitted prior to February 1, you can still apply for admission. You can still be eligible for things like the non-resident achievement scholarship and those sorts of things. So it's a great way. If you miss the Feb 1 deadline, or you got a buddy that says, "Oh, you're going to Oklahoma State, I want to go there too," he or she, your buddy, can still go ahead and apply for admission. Definitely not too late. We've got those non-competitive awards out there. We've got the opportunities. Some of the non-competitives will get re-awarded, not all of them, for students who are suddenly become eligible for a higher award, those sorts of things. But Feb 1 is the competitive scholarship priority deadline, but deadline for admission, we don't have one, although the deadline for getting admitted is the first step of the process. Getting admitted to the university is the first step in the financial aid discussion, financial aid process when it comes to scholarships, competitive and not competitive, grants, loans, aid opportunities, and those sorts of things. To sum up, to close out the evening, first of all, I want to thank all of you for joining us. I think we've had some very good questions. We've had a great discussion, both, thanks for that thing. I will feel better with the head cold. We've had a great discussion. We've had some very good questions. Hopefully we answered some of, if we didn't get to your question specifically, hopefully we've put your nerves at ease, helped you navigate the process, know what's next steps you need to take, make sure you're eligible for that priority 1 scholarship deadline. But particularly as you navigate the process, do not hesitate to reach out to one of our admissions professionals, one of our financial aid professionals. It's our jobs to help you navigate the process. No question is too basic, no question is too unique. Our financial aid office is staffed with some very talented, very friendly people who are out there to help you and students just like you navigate this process. It's what they do day in and day out, and they're very good at it. So utilize us. We're here to help. But until I get a chance to see you next time, thanks for joining us tonight, folks, and go Pokes.